little, because I wanted to read for the ladies tonight. And I just came out with a book. I was lucky enough to have my 5th book come out last week, and it's about the Bloomsburys. Okay, so there's a picture of Virginia Woolf on there, and she died on the 23rd of March. So I'll mention that in a minute, but people were asking me about, I just appeared in Presence, which is a journal of Catholic poetry, and the story that goes is that I was lucky enough to hook up with a lady who's a doctorate. She's over at Caldwell University, and she was doing St. Peter's Bee List about Catholic poetry, and you had to write a poem about a saint. So I kept sending her all my poems, which were about Job and about Noah. And about 7 times into this, she said to me, she emails me back, and she says, "Do you know what a saint is?" I said, "I'm a Lutheran." So I had no idea. I thought if you were in the Old Testament, you were a saint. She's laughing back there, right? I promised you I'd tell you this story. Okay, but I ended up getting a Saint Mary, Mother Mary, and into this book. So I ended up in this journal, and I wrote about D.H. Lawrence when he was in Taos. And when he ended up in Taos, it's a long story, but they lost his ashes, and it was, a lot was going on when he was in Taos, as you can affirm, right, Robert?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so after I had done the Gertrude Stein Salon ideas, I came out with the Virginia Woolf and the Bloomsbury group, okay? Now I'm working on D.H. Lawrence and Peggy Guggenheim, and that will be my last book. I promise I'm done. But this, just to give you a background, so this is about when he moved there, he ends up with a cow that he names Black-Eyed Susan. That was his cow, which he loved, and I wrote a poem about that, which is going to be published too. And this one is called Prayer from the White Angora, because that's what he ended up with. He ended up with this mess of land, some Angoras, and 1 cow, and that was about it, okay? So I was asking our beloved director how to say this name, Carmen Bernot de Gazond. Does that?
De Gazond.
Yeah. She wrote Prayers from the Ark. Okay, so this is Prayer from the White Angora. Sorry, it's a longer introduction than the poem. Lord, given my circumstance, left behind to be treated as fluff and not stock, I am pessimistic. Give me giddiness of heart, Lord. Oh, to be of use, not a wandering vagrant. What is freedom when we can only go so far? We are a shaggy lot with sour dispositions. Once we were groomed, our desires fulfilled. Now we yearn to be white blankets, shoulder snowdrifts, a fancy lady's shawl. Lord, our lives are pointless, a hobbyist toys. Round us up, God, and release us to some useful place. Like devoted missionaries, the world will be tamed by us. Today it is a bowl of sky and hollow purpose. You have turned us into an affectation, each bereft of hope. Seer of all, there is no future in being exotic, with no chance of redemption, stuck as we are in a dull and common life. Okay, so I wanted to read another Catholic poem, and this is when I was on my kick about the Bible and not knowing who was what and what was where. But Lazarus, after he was raised, he went to live in Cyprus. Okay? So I like the idea of a Lazarus living in Cyprus among people and walking around, and what people must have thought of this man that was now raised from the dead. And again, Robert talks about stuff like that a lot, so I thought this was appropriate to read this. Lazarus receives a visit from his sister Mary. Mary, if you recall, that particular Mary was the one that had her hair, she used perfume and she washed Jesus' feet with her hair. Excuse me. Lazarus receives a visit from his sister Mary. We put Mary to work in the garden, had her bury her fingers in the black earth of Cyprus. Often we heard her weep, the foolishness of loving a man promised to God. Her tears baptized white and scarlet petals. We sent her to the market to sell vegetables we had grown. She carried her wicker basket against her tiny frame. She struggled under the bounty of peppers and figs. When he asked her if she loved him, they both knew what he meant. After the murder that darkened the skies on the hill, she threw herself at the cross like a mad thing. She made me burn her hair. I used a straight knife, sharpened against a rock, and cut it with care. Her head on a table, I worried it was her throat she wanted me to slit. Her eyes were fevered with a strange grief that is not of spiritual passion. It was then I understood why she had broken into her money box, squandered perfume to wash his feet. But her hair, her beauty gone, all traces of that act that made her sweet to us lying on the floor ready to be swept away. It was yellow, like a field of sun's orchids. It was a gold coin, waiting to be spent. I'm going to read, if I can read two more.
If they're short.
Okay,
Sure.
all right. I was going to read one for our friend over here because it's about Selkies, and it's just published. Okay, so it's called Shipwrecked in a Reel of Stars. I believe in Selkies. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but...
I do.
Okay. The lulling of the sirens was bliss, and then the wrench of ship and sound, as you lay in the wreckage showing skin like the pale belly of a freckled starfish. I remembered Selkie men and imagined that this must be a sin. Your mother left an almanac of all your truths and lies written in her even hand, and tumbled as smooth as sand and shells around your head. A petticoat of foam was crushed around your feet. There was no future there among the glass. I stole a line from you that day and sold it. My tongue is a slippery piece of pink silk. Jealous soul merchants want it, and me too. You knew my small frame would dangle without shame and the shiver of those biting stars. Your eyes glowed red, and I answered you with my crooked little heart. Okay. And I just wanted to do a Virginia Woolf poem because obviously that's what the book is about. And so every poem in the first part of this is about Roger Fry, E.M. Forster, Duncan Grant, all the people of that time. And to me it was very interesting. It's to take a historical person and then write a poem from that point of view. But since most people are familiar with Virginia Woolf and her death, I'm going to read that one. And this got a New Jersey Poets Prize last week. So, thank you. Last year I got one for Gertrude Stein. This year I'm doing it for Virginia Woolf. Okay, so the thing I need to tell you, though, is that Bloomsbury gang called themselves the Apostles, okay? and it's called Bloomsberries because one of the wives of the group called them the Bloomsberries, like you say libraries, right? Okay, Stones for the Apostle. And it starts out with an epigraph by Virginia Woolf. Against you, I will fling myself unvanquished and unyielding, O death. There were stones for skimming. They parted the watery sheets of her suicide like the palms of God. She had rehearsed them for years, practicing their music. She summoned them like tongues of the apostles as they announced her arrival. Like God, she had chosen a Jew. She didn't believe in him exactly. Stones beckoned her through these gates of the sacred Jews. She employed them like soldiers, heavy and round, beautiful as spring potatoes. She divided them into each pocket. There were always plenty to share. This river kneaded them like bread. She would leave a trail as she sank down deeper into the brackish waters of her imagination, down, down, touching bottom at last. She planted them like a nest of eggs. They were gorgeous, a man's hidden body. This terror of the unknown only took her under for moments, this cool lover's embrace. She had anticipated this end her entire life. She is a vessel emptying to herself of words, the burden of her skin, the first awkward sentence, a last vowel escaping her mouth, churning to the surface of the river Ouse. How beautiful, she shudders. My soul now, this river free at last.
Bravo, bravo.
Thank you, Laurie.
Yeah,
Laurie Byro, boy, that last one was great.
thank you.
Certainly deserved the prize.
Thank you very much.
All right.